What is up, my dudes? It is Alec Lindstrom, former Boston College offensive lineman. You're listening to Basketball Conference, the ACC football podcast. Go Eagles and go ACC.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to Basketball Conference, the ACC football podcast. My name is Joey Weaver. He is Conor O'Neill, publisher, Deacons Illustrated on the On3 network. You know him, you love him, friend of the show. Conor, welcome back. Good to have you.
Thanks for having me. Happy to talk some football. It's a little early. Like the calendar still says July. I'm used to this being in August, but I'll get used to it.
Well, you know, when this conference only had like 12 teams, it was a lot easier to procrastinate on these things. But yeah, with 17 to preview, we looked up the other day and it was like, we're in a spot here. Conor, looking forward to talking some Wake Forest here tonight. Of course, that's who you cover for Deacons Illustrated on the On3 network. Interesting situation for the Deacs this year. Obviously, we talked about in the past. Dave Clawson retires at the end of last year. Jake Dickert hired in as the head coach from Washington State. Curious to how the Wake fan base has received Dickert so far. I mean, obviously, you go from a long time, a staple with that program, Dave Clawson there for over 10 years. He's got a certain way of doing things, a certain way of communicating. You figure Jake Dickert, something a little bit different, you know. So curious to hear what the reception has been like with the fans so far, and any differences that you've seen.
So I think there's a nuanced way to talk about Dave Clawson and kind of the changeover that has happened in the last 8 months with this program. You can have an appreciation for what Dave did at Wake Forest and understand that he accomplished things at Wake that really a lot of people thought would not be accomplished in this day and age of college football. When you think about not only the 11-win season in 2021, that's the one that everybody goes to, but for me, it's really the bowl streak, going to 7 straight bowls. Of course, it's easier to make a bowl these days than it ever was in the past in college football, but you're talking about 7 straight seasons where you were good enough to qualify for a bowl. And I think before in Wake's history, their longest streak was 3 years. And that was the 3 years with Riley Skinner. And Riley Skinner, his redshirt senior year, they didn't even make a bowl. They were 5-7 that year. So it's just the consistency of being a winning team and being a tough team to match up for in the ACC, handling your business for the most part out of conference. That's all what Dave did well. And then not to mention everything about how he represented Wake Forest and how he was the perfect fit for an ambassador of Wake Forest. You take all that and bundle up and talk about Dave's legacy. The last 2 years didn't go well. Like there's no beating around the bush of 2 4-8 records. There's no sugarcoating 2 years that they pretty much got QB wrong. Pushing a lot of chips toward Mitch Griffiths in the 2023 season. That didn't work out. Going into last year with 2 6th-year guys with the thought that Jeremy Heklinski was the future behind them. Hank Bachmeier had an okay season. It's not all on Hank. Their defense was bad in some spots last year, but just it was not the Wake Forest of Sam Hartman, John Walford, Jamie Newman. It was a shell of that. So this program needed to change. And granted, maybe it would have changed, but we weren't seeing the change from the time that last season ended and the time that Dave Clawson chose to resign or announce the resignation. Like there were no staff changes announced in that time frame. The transfer pickups were not flashy. You didn't feel like they were picking up any difference makers. It was very much looking like it was going to be a 3rd straight year of, can they cobble enough together? Can they put enough development into an unproven quarterback who suddenly becomes a P4 starter? And it just would not be the formula. So we're going to get into it here. No matter how this year goes for Wake Forest, I think there's got to be part of in the back of your mind, you understand, okay, maybe it's tough to watch right now, but this is a better alternative than year 3 of what has been on the field, which is what it was looking like. Maybe it wouldn't have played out that way, but it looked like it was going to. And I think that's what I think Wake fans are, for the most part, understanding of. They appreciate what Dave did. They also understand things needed to change, and they weren't going to change to the level that they needed to change if Dave was still the coach.
Well, and to that point, I mean, the more that I've sat on this hire and kind of marinated on it and thought about it, initially it was like, you're hiring a guy who hadn't coached east of the Mississippi almost ever, and he has a really short tenure as a head coach at all. It just kind of felt like it was an odd choice, and wasn't sure if I bought it or not. But the more I think about it, that's kind of what I came up with. Is we talked a lot on this show about Dave Clawson and kind of having his way of doing things. He wanted to redshirt guys. He didn't really like kind of where this new era of college football was going with paying players and the transfer portal and like all that stuff. And I feel like that's probably got to be a lot of the thinking in hiring Jake Dickert here. Is this is a guy who will embrace those things. And at the very least, I don't feel like Wake is some massively under-resourced program. I think if you've got a guy who's willing to embrace some of that stuff, there are resources there to continue to have a competitive product on the field.
I think part of the pull to add on to that is you're bringing in a guy that knows what it's like to be at a school that's discounted and a program that's been told they're not good enough to do the things that they're trying to do. They're basically being told you have no room to be ambitious because this is your lot in college football. This is your place in the world.
Yep.
I don't know how it's going to work out, but I do know Jake Dickert doesn't see things that way. Like, he's not going to be told this is what you can do, this is what you can't do. They're going to have some pretty high expectations of themselves. The other thing you got to remember with Dave, by coaching standards, Dave was a young coach. I think he was 57 on the date he resigned.
Yeah.
Dave had a lot of years in coaching on him. Like, at one point when he was hired by Fordham, I believe he was the youngest Division I coach in the country. I think he was hired early 30s. He might have even been 30 or I don't think he was late 20s, but I think it was early 30s when he became a head coach. And he'd been a head coach since, I think, 99 or 2000, maybe 2001, other than that 1 year stint as offensive coordinator under Fulmer at Tennessee. He was a head coach for a long time. And we talked to Dave a lot over the last couple of years, and one of the things he loved to tell us was there had been more change in the last X number of months, usually less than like 24, in being a college football coach than the previous 25 years.
Yeah.
And so, I think there are some coaches in college football that can adjust to that. I think some of these guys, I'm kind of drawing a blank on maybe Pat Narduzzi is a good example. Not exactly the longest tenured head coach, but certainly a guy that coached in a previous era of college football who has shown that he can kind of adapt and roll with where the sport is headed. And I think Dave, in his resignation press conference, said it. I mean, he thinks players should be paid. The parts that go along with that were the ones where he disagreed, like the timelines of when he was having to have transfer portal conversations with guys in the middle of November when he's trying to get them to understand what they've got to do to win a game in 4 days. Instead, he's talking to them about, well, how much NIL do you need for us to keep you out of the portal? And I think Dave he straight up told us he didn't want to do that anymore. He just was tired.
Yep.
And I think when you have a coach like Jake Dickert, who, yes, he's young, but also he's young in head coaching years. Like, coaching with NIL is the only head coaching that Jake Dickert knows. True. So I think I think we're going to see in college football, there's going to be a shift to hire guys that have not put in the years in the previous era, because those are the guys that are going to be reticent and kind of resistant to change and kind of fight you tooth and nail and be a little more reluctant to embrace that type of stuff.
Makes complete sense. Connor, one of the things that we're going to talk about in this show is that there was a pretty massive amount of roster turnover here. And that's not unusual in this day and age with a coaching changeover like this. And I would also venture to say that it probably was not an unwarranted or unnecessary thing at the quarterback position in particular. As you mentioned, I mean, Hank Bachmeier, Michael Kern, those guys gone and weren't necessarily like the most effective either. Coming in transfer-wise, you had Deshaun Purdy transfers in from Charlotte. Robbie Ashford transfers in from South Carolina. Have you gotten a read yet? Is it going to be Purdy? Is it going to be Ashford? Is there a door number 3 here? I guess I'm curious, and I think both these guys came in for the spring. So they've done spring practice, summer workouts, and now they're starting fall camp. I guess, have you gotten a sense if one guy really leads over the other?
So the easy answer is no. And here we're recording, and I've seen they've had 2 fall camp practices. I've been at both. They've already got a door number 3 not open, like no doors. I'm envisioning this as like no doors are open yet, but there is a door number 3 that's right next to the other 2 doors. And they have a freshman that came in from California, was going to go to Washington State and followed the coaching staff, got out of his letter, everything like that. His name is Steele Pizzella. So this is where you like gestures in Italian. Steele Pizzella. And look, he's a smaller quarterback. Jake Dickert told us after practice today, like, yes, he is an option. They're going to evaluate him. They understand, like, Robbie Ashford is 6'2", maybe 220. Deshaun Purdy is a little bigger. Steele Pizzella might be 6 foot, might be 190 pounds or maybe 200 pounds. I don't know. If he is the guy, they'll have to roll the pocket a little more. They'll have to be creative in creating some throwing lanes for him. But what I can say through 2 practices, granted, just helmets only, base vanilla stuff on both sides of the ball, he makes the safest plays. Like, he has not put the ball into harm's way nearly as much as the other 2 guys. He gives receivers more of a chance to come down and make plays on the ball. Deshaun Purdy and Robbie Ashford, I mean, I can't caveat this enough. It's only 2 days. Like, they might show me something later in fall camp that tells me that they can be consistent. But right now, man, you don't know where the ball is going with either one of them sometimes. They've missed some open guys. So I wrote in something today. Yeah. I wrote in something today, like, I think there are a few more twists in the road in the next like 3 weeks with this quarterback battle. I don't feel comfortable handicapping it at all. We'll just see where they end up.
I was gonna say, it sounds like that's not necessarily just, well, it didn't really know the play or the route combination, or where to throw the ball. It's more knew where to throw the ball, couldn't get it there. And that's kind of a different problem.
Yeah. And here's the other part of it is I do think there is a little bit of talent in the skill positions. Like, everybody knows Damon Claiborne is going to get the ball and be the bell cow of the offense. I think they've got a running back behind him named Ty Clark III who can be decent. I think they've got a couple of slot receivers. Both came from Washington State, Carlos Hernandez and Chris Barnes. They've got some pop when they get the ball in their hands. They can move. And, they've got some really big receivers on the outside. They came from some lower level places, so they might not be able to separate, but they do kind of remind you of what Wake looked like when they're throwing jump balls to Sage Stratton, Scotty Washington, A.T. Perry after them, Donovan Green, Jamal Banks. Like, they've got some bigger basketball looking type bodies on the outside. It's just a matter of you got to have a quarterback that can get the ball to those guys.
I still am just like in disbelief at that game where they were just mossing Clemson defenders left and right. And I want to say that Clemson won that game, but just barely. Like, they were hanging on for dear life at the end.
That's the one. it's a tricky conversation because Wake went down to Florida State and won the next week. So that's not where the complete unraveling happened. I think it was a month later when they went to Louisville and Sam turned the ball over like 6 times in the same quarter.
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
But that Clemson game, it was a 56-49 double overtime loss. Probably the last good game DJU will ever play in his life.
Yeah.
I think he had 6 touchdown passes. And Wake kind of took their foot off the gas offensively in the fourth quarter because Clemson changed their coverage. And Clemson hardly ever changes. The way that it's been explained to me, Clemson never does what they did coverage-wise in the fourth quarter because that's how much they were beating Clemson's DBs up. And that's kind of the one.
Man, simpler times.
Yep.
Simpler times. Well, Connor, you kind of alluded to it with some incoming receivers from Washington State, especially an incoming quarterback who was going to be going to Washington State. One of the things we didn't mention, I think we said that there are several members of the coaching staff that were with Jake Dickert at Washington State. This is something that we've seen in college football, that kind of some of these massive, what do you want to call it? Like a shift change, or kind of just lift like a quarter of the roster at the old place and move it to the new place.
Yep.
We were joking on here that this season we might need to call them Washington Forest instead of Wake Forest, but I don't know how fair you think that is. But I guess, who are if you're looking at a few of the key pieces that did leave, that are going to be tough or unfortunate to have to replace, and then a couple of the key pieces coming in either from the transfer portal or even out of high school. Who are the guys that you're looking at to be really kind of big impact guys that are new to Winston-Salem this fall?
So covering both bases with the same position group, Wake lost, I think, 4 starting offensive linemen if you include everybody that started, which means they might have had 6 or 7 starters on the offensive line last year. They lost 4 of them to the portal, and all 4 went to power conference schools. Like Matt Golbin went to Michigan State, Luke Pettibone's at Florida State. I think Keegan Trost went to Missouri, and I'm blanking on who the other one would have been. Nick Sharp went to South Carolina. So 2 SECs, an ACC, and a Big Ten. That's anytime you lose 4 starters from your offensive line unplanned, like it's not like those guys graduated and you knew you were losing them. That's going to be tough to replace. Now, probably the biggest, not just physically, the biggest transfer they brought in is, I'm going to try to get this name right. You got to understand, I've been pronouncing this in my head for like 7 months one way. And then at ACC kickoff last week, I heard his teammate who also came over, Devin Kalani, is the center on the offensive line. Falili Fa'amoe is the big tackle from Washington State. He's from America Samoa. I think America Samoa. I'm not sure on that one, but he is Samoan. We talked to him for the first time today. He's a big one. Like I think he was in a bunch of people's top 100 transfers across the country last year. You know how rare it is to see an offensive lineman of starter caliber in the transfer portal. Like that's the position that tends to stick around. Feels like more than most. He probably could have gone just about anywhere that is looking for a tackle upgrade, and he chose to follow this coaching staff. They're gonna, to get into a little bit of the scheme of the offense, they're gonna run a power spread. Like the slow mesh is dead. No more pitter. Damon Claiborne is a big fan of telling us that he doesn't have to pitter patter behind the offensive line anymore. He can just get it and go.
R.I.P. to the slow mesh.
He's made no secrets about how much he appreciates what the slow mesh did, but also he's really happy to be in a different offense. But they're going to need a good offensive line. And they brought in Falili. They bring in Devin Kalani as the center. They also brought in a third guy who's, I think, going to start on the offensive line, Roderick Tia-Lavea. So you're bringing over 3 guys that have starting experience on the offensive line. They brought in transfers from other places. They had one guy who is an incumbent offensive lineman from last year, George Sell, stuck around, and I think he'll be a starter at right guard. So up front is where I look at. I mean, they got transfers all over the place. Defensive line too is the big one, Jaden Loving. But defensive line is where Wake knew they were losing a ton of guys. I think they were losing 5 or 6 of their top 7 to graduation last year. So they knew they were going to have an overhaul on their hands up front on that side of the ball. It's just the offensive line is where they had to have a complete makeover.
I mean, that's huge, though, because especially those positions, following the coaching staff, like if you know what the coaches want to do schematically, that can really kind of put you ahead, and that'll really help the adaptation there. Speaking of which, and you kind of alluded to it, a power spread scheme that we're going to be looking at. Just I like to ask about expectations on offense. I don't really know. When you got this many new pieces, it's hard to say like who the 1 or 2 key guys are going to be. Obviously, Damon Claiborne, like you said, going to be the bell cow. You have to figure.
I know number 1. Like that's the jersey number he wears. That's the priority number he is going to be for every defense they play. Like it's going to be Damon.
Yep. So I guess what does a power spread look like schematically? Is this like single back, 2 tight end kind of thing, or what? Do you know roughly what the coaching staff is trying to do on offense? Because I'll be honest, years ago I watched a lot more college football. I would have known a lot more about what Washington State was doing, but these days I don't really have the bandwidth to keep up with everybody at that level. So I'm curious to know what we're expecting to see here.
I was waiting for the dog to take the leap for anybody watching. So it's interesting because Washington State was running more of a spread air raid type of offense. The offense that's coming to Wake is more what South Alabama was running last year. That's where the offensive coordinator, Rob Ezell, comes from. I think it's something that Jake would tell you he's wanted to run, and now we'll get the chance to do so. You're right on the personnel. I think you're going to see some 12 personnel, maybe get really crazy and throw some 13 in there. I did the preview for Athlon, and they need a depth chart. The only problem is they need that by like early April, and the portal was not open yet for the spring. And so I'm sitting there, and I was only able to watch a couple spring practices, but I'm looking at them in the spring practices, and I think one practice they only had walk-on tight ends. Like they only had 2 or 3 of them, and they were all walk-ons. I'm like, there's no way that what they want to do offensively is going to be accomplished with what they have in the tight end room right now. But Athlon needed something, so I just scribbled down like, here's what they have. They're going to bring in different guys. I think they brought in 4 tight ends from the portal. One of them was actually a guy that got back. He left. Harry Lodge went to Georgia Tech amid the coaching change. He spent the spring there and came back to Wake Forest.
Just took like an extended sabbatical in Atlanta and then came back.
It's almost like a study abroad program, except, if you study abroad, I think you're supposed to go somewhere that's more than like 5-hour drive away from where you're going to school.
Yeah. Maybe learn a new language, anything.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, he might have learned a new language in Atlanta. He's from like Boston, so it might all be new to him.
There was an education there for sure.
Yeah. They did not do the pronunciation people any favors with the guys they brought in. There's a tight end from Utah Tech who had been at UMass before, I think, Falali. He is a big one. He's probably about 6'4", 240. Camrion Johnson came from Vanderbilt. He looks a lot more like just an oversized wide receiver. And then Will Lorzel came from South Alabama with Rob Ezell. So they've bulked up the tight end position. And I was telling somebody out of practice today, actually, it's funny. Like tight end has been kind of a non-factor. It's kind of been this diminished position, especially for Wake people that remember when Cam Serenay was their leading receiver in the early Dave Clawson seasons. Looking out there today and is like, man, they've got a really interesting tight end room. They've got a bunch of guys they can throw the ball to, and a couple of them can create mismatch problems. Like, they look both fast and big, and they could do some things with that. So schematically, I mean, like I said about the quarterback position, all of this conversation about scheme and skill is moot if they don't get that figured out and get it right. But there is intrigue there, and it is a new offense. It's got some excitement. I mean, you can, like I said, you talk to Damon for 3 minutes about the different offense, and he'll tell you 5 times how glad he is to be playing in an offense where he can just get the ball and go. So,
for what it's worth, by the way, too, if you want to feel old, offensive coordinator Rob Ezell, there's an old video that went viral on Twitter, I don't know, probably 15 years ago, whatever it was, of some, white kid with really good hair in the Alabama locker room doing a great Nick Saban impression.
Yep.
That was Rob Ezell. He's now the offensive coordinator at Wake Forest. So, yeah, that's that definitely made me feel old when I learned that. On the other hand, on defense, new defensive coordinator Scotty Hazelton, he is less of a spring chicken. He has been a longtime defensive coordinator going all the way back to like around the time Rob Ezell was at Alabama, I guess. But stops at North Dakota State, Nevada, Wyoming, Kansas State, Michigan State, all of those as defensive coordinator. He comes in, obviously provides a veteran presence on the staff. Defense, I feel like has always been a little bit hit or miss the last several years under Dave Clawson. You've had some good pass rushers, you've had some good players here or there, but has not often been the calling card of this team. Do you imagine that's going to change here, Connor, or do you figure that continues to be a bit of a sticking point for him?
I kind of think if this team is going to go to a bowl game, which I've kind of set the bar as if this team gets to 6-6, it'll be a successful season. Like, nobody, they were picked to finish 16th in a 17-team league. Nobody expects Wake Forest to be excellent in year one. I tend to think if they're going to make a bowl game, they're going to have to win a lot of games with their defense. They might have to win some ugly ones like 17-13, 16-10. Those types of scores might need to happen for this team to make it to 6. I've been fooled before at this time of year. I'm perfectly willing to accept that I've written a lot of stories over the years about how this year's going to be different. Their defense has X, Y, and Z, and then we get into the season, it's like, oh, right. They were one injury away, and they've had 3 other injuries, and they're toast, and they're hoping to win games 45-42. And they were able to do that sometimes. But I'm kind of getting sucked back into the hole. Like, I do think there's some depth. I think there's some experience. Gosh, you mentioned wanting to feel old. Nick Anderson's still in college football. I mean, that kid was on NBC News during the 2020 COVID season for having the 3 interception game against Virginia Tech. Yep. So he's still back there in the secondary. Devon Patterson and Rushawn Tong have been coming. They're both going into their 3rd season, and it feels like they're budding stars. Dylan Hazen's played a ton of football. He was playing against Army in that 2021 game up in West Point that was like 70-56. And he's been a multi-year starter. Quincy Bryant had really great PFF grades last year. They've never been able to really like keep him healthy enough to play 50 to 60 snaps a game at linebacker. Maybe the snap can do it. And I think they've got to figure some things out on defensive line, but they've got options. Like, they brought in 2 guys from Colorado State. Gabe Kershke, I think, is going to be a starter at defensive end. Newer Gotkuth. Again, the pronunciations with this team, they that's one I can tell you that's an improvement, or maybe not an improvement. They made it more difficult than it was under Clawson with some of these names they've brought in. But I do think, and I'm out there again on this limb that is cracked and broken and had me land on my rear end several times. I do think they can be better on defense, and I think
There it is.
this team might need to lean on it.
Yeah. Well, the nice thing for them is they do have a nice little on-ramp to start the year as we look at the schedule here. Really, honestly, this is a pretty forgiving out-of-conference schedule. They start the year with Kennesaw State and Western Carolina at home. Later in the year, you have Delaware at home as well. So you play 2 of the 5 newest teams into the FBS, I think, with those 2.
Yep.
You do have a road trip in October going to Oregon State. So, I mean, overall, in my mind, a fairly forgiving out-of-conference schedule. And if you want to make a bowl game, 3-1 is the bare minimum there, and it would be nice to find a way to beat Oregon State. And obviously, this coaching staff, plenty of them have familiarity with that program, and we'll have a bit of a leg up on what to do there. But then I look at the conference schedule, and I mean, it's not impossibly hard, but it's not hard to think that Wake might be an underdog in every conference game that they play. NC State, Georgia Tech, at Virginia Tech, SMU, at Florida State, at Virginia, North Carolina, and at Duke. I guess as you look at this, Connor, I mean, how do you grade this out from a difficulty standpoint? And you've already kind of alluded to it a little bit, but do you have a record prediction that you're willing to put down for the year with all that is new and everything we're looking at here on the schedule?
Ugh, I don't know if I have a record prediction. I do think it's in the realm of possibility that they go 4-0 in the non-conference and still don't make a bowl. Because you think about probably the 2 worst teams they play in the ACC are the Virginia schools, and both of them are road games.
Yeah.
Wake does have this weird kind of hex on NC State. No matter how good NC State is, no matter how bad Wake is, it's really hard for NC State to win in Winston-Salem.
Bit of a House of Horrors situation.
Yeah, very, very much so. So that one interests me. It's also a Thursday night game. I think September 11th. So that'll be a kind of a weird one.
Going up against the NFL on that one? Good for you,
button right up against the NFL. I don't know why that's not a Friday night game, especially with the ACC one. The ACC wants to make everything about they own Friday nights, and then it's like, what do you put this one on a Thursday night for? I think they got good breaks with the bye, with the off weeks. I also covered Duke, and they're both of their off weeks are in a 3-week span. They're one of 3 ACC teams that has that quirk in the schedule. I think that is awful for bodies, for rhythm of a football season. So Wake is fortunate that they're not one of those teams. Miami and Carolina are the others. Obviously, like 5 games in November, it's going to come down to November. It's bound to, unless the wheels completely come off and they're 0-7, and if that's the case, then they've got bigger problems on their slate than worrying about winning 2 or 3 games in November. But so Dave Clawson was at Wake 11 years. I think the final record, his career record at Wake, was 67-69. He never had a winning November. 11 years, and the best they did in November was 2-2. Even the year that they went to the ACC championship game, they were 2-2 in November. They lost to Carolina and Clemson. So not burying them, but it's hard for Wake to have good Novembers. Depth plays a factor. Usually when they have a home game that last week of the season, I don't think they do this year, but that's always a game that they have a skin and bones, family and friends type of crowd, because everybody's at Thanksgiving and students aren't on campus. So I think it's going to come down to November. I don't know what Carolina is going to look like, and they're in November. I don't know what's going to be left of Virginia by mid-November.
Yeah.
It's it's not the most forgiving ACC schedule there could be.
That's the pair of games I was kind of looking at. Again, November 8th at Virginia and then November 15th at home against North Carolina is like a couple of what I might call bellwether games, games that you get a good sense of like, are we building? Are we making progress? And obviously, if depth is an issue and injuries are piling up, then throw it all out. There's nothing to be found here. But I think that's kind of a late season opportunity to show that you're building and developing and showing a little bit of progress, even if, the start of the season is a little bit rough. So that might be a stretch to kind of keep an eye on later in the year.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that's what makes this so difficult to project. I have no idea what Carolina looks like. They're a complete mystery. I think that Virginia and Virginia Tech aren't going to be very good, but crazier things have happened than teams playing really well when their coaches are perceivably on the hot seat. I do think that Wake's games against SMU and Georgia Tech will be kind of academic. I think those are going to be really bad matchups for them. I think down the road we can talk about Jake Dickert wanting to build the type of program that Brent Key has built, but Brent Key is entering year 4 basically, or year 3 as the full-time guy.
Yeah,
like that's his program, and he's had time to establish it. Jake has not. He's had one spring and brought in a bunch of new guys since that spring.
Yeah. Will be an interesting year 1 for Jake Dickert in Winston-Salem. And kind of like we're alluding to, I mean, I don't know that the results will necessarily be there right off the bat, but, again, hopefully you see some signs of development and some building that goes into a year 2 coming up next year. And obviously get some momentum into the offseason, potentially attract some more transfers in, or, really ramp up the high school recruiting, whatever it might be. Hopefully there's some sort of good feelings to cling on to coming out of the year, whatever the record might end up being. Conor, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time and walking through all this with us. You want to tell the people real quick where they can go find your stuff?
Yeah. Deacons Illustrated. I've got to get used to saying it's part of the On 3 network and not the Rivals network anymore.
Congratulations on that, by the way.
Thank you. Happy to stay on and be running the site still. on3.com/sites/Deacons-Illustrated. I haven't tested this, but I think if you just type in DeaconsIllustrated.com, it will take you to the right place. But for the sake of my testing ability here, on3.com/sites/Deacons-Illustrated.
Absolutely. Conor, you're the best. Really appreciate it. Enjoy the season. We look forward to having you back on sometime soon. All right.
Thanks, Joey. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. We're going to get out of here. We got more teams we got to come back and preview. So keep it tuned here as we get you ready for the season. YouTube.com/@the-ACC Football Podcast. Hit that subscribe button. Go follow Conor on Twitter @Conor O'Neill _DI for all things Wake Forest and some Duke coverage as well. He is fantastic follow there, and a lot of other things on Twitter as well. Conor's just generally a good follow, so go find him there. We are going to be back here with some more previews, so keep it tuned here one more time. Find your podcasts on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you want to, wherever you get those, wherever they're sold for free. All right, until next time, for Mr. Conor O'Neill, I am Joey Weaver. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll talk to you again very, very soon. Until next time, go Deeks and go ACC.